The rain came down in sheets that night, cold and merciless, soaking the empty street, and the woman standing alone, beneath a flickering street lamp. Amara clutched her swollen belly with trembling hands, her thin dress plastered to her skin, her long hair heavy with water. She was 8 months pregnant, exhausted, and terrified, but none of that mattered to the man stepping away from her. Victor Hale, billionaire tycoon, media darling, and her husband of 7 years, didn't look back. "I can't do this anymore," he said flatly, adjusting the collar of his tailored coat as if the moment were nothing more than a business inconvenience. Behind him, a sleek black car idled, its headlights cutting through the rain. Inside sat Celeste, his mistress, perfectly dry, perfectly made up, watching with a satisfied smile. "You're leaving me. Like this?" Amara whispered, her voice nearly swallowed by the storm. "Victor, I'm carrying your child." Victor exhaled sharply, irritation flashing across his face. "You'll be taken care of. My lawyer will contact you. Don't make a scene." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Taken care of? I gave you everything. I believed in you when you had nothing." "That was before," he snapped. "Before you became a burden." The words struck harder than the rain. "Burden." Celeste rolled down the window slightly. "Victor, darling, we'll be late for the gala," she said sweetly, her eyes flicking toward Amara with thinly veiled contempt. That was all it took. Victor opened the passenger door, slipped into the car beside his mistress, and shut Amara out, literally and figuratively. The car pulled away, splashing muddy water onto her feet as it disappeared into the night. Amara collapsed to her knees, sobbing. One hand pressed to her stomach as a sharp pain twisted through her abdomen. "Please," she whispered to the darkness, "just let my baby be okay." She didn't know then that this moment, the rain, the betrayal, the abandonment, was the beginning of a story far bigger than Victor Hale could ever imagine. Labor began before dawn. Amara was found hours later by an elderly woman named Ruth, who ran a small, nearly forgotten clinic on the outskirts of the city. By the time they reached the delivery room, Amara was barely conscious, her body racked with pain and fever. "It's too early," the nurse murmured nervously. Amara screamed, not just from pain, but from fear. "Please, save my baby." After endless hours, a cry finally pierced the room. Small, fragile, alive. A daughter. Amara wept as they placed the baby on her chest. "You're safe," she whispered through tears. "I promise you. I'll protect you. No matter what." They named her Leora, meaning light. Life after that was brutal. Victor's promised support never came. The lawyers vanished. The bank accounts were frozen. Amara sold her wedding ring, then her clothes, then anything of value she had left. They moved into a single rented room above a closed bakery. Winters were cold. Food was scarce. Amara worked sewing garments by hand late into the night, her fingers raw and bleeding, while Leora slept beside her in a cardboard crib lined with blankets. Sometimes Amara would stare at her daughter and whisper apologies. "I'm sorry you were born into this. I'm sorry I couldn't give you more." But Leora would smile, bright and fearless, as if she understood none of that mattered. Years passed. Amara never spoke Victor's name. She taught Leora kindness, resilience, and quiet strength. She told her stories about dignity, about helping others even when you have nothing. And every night, she kissed her forehead and said the same words. "You are worth more than the world." What Amara never told her daughter, what no one knew, was who she truly was. Before marrying Victor, Amara had been the sole heir to a hidden global trust, built generations earlier by her grandfather, a reclusive genius who believed wealth should move silently. The fortune was so vast, so carefully shielded. It was known only to a handful of trustees sworn to secrecy. Amara had walked away from it for love, and she would have stayed away forever if fate hadn't demanded justice. Leora grew into a remarkable young woman, brilliant, calm, and deeply empathetic. She excelled in school despite having almost nothing. Scholarships followed her everywhere. By 25, she had built a quiet reputation as a financial strategist who could rescue collapsing companies without ever seeking credit. People underestimated her constantly. She dressed simply, spoke softly, smiled kindly, but behind the scenes, she was changing the world. When Amara fell ill, the truth finally emerged. Sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, Leora listened as Amara revealed everything: the betrayal, the rain, the abandonment, and the fortune she had never touched. "Why didn't you use it?" Leora asked through tears. Amara smiled weakly. "Because I wanted you to grow up human, not guarded." When Amara passed away peacefully days later, Leora cried until she had no tears left. Then she stood up, and she claimed what was hers. Within months, whispers spread through elite, financial circles, about a mysterious force acquiring failing banks, stabilizing markets, and funding massive humanitarian projects without ever appearing publicly. They called her the silent trillionaire. Victor Hale felt the impact first. His empire, already weakened by greed and scandal, began collapsing. Investors pulled out. Deals vanished. One by one, his companies were bought, quietly, by an unnamed entity. Until one day, he received an invitation. A private meeting. One last chance at salvation. Victor entered the glass boardroom confident, though nervous. When the doors opened, his breath caught. A young woman stood at the head of the table. She turned slowly. "Hello, father." The word hit him like a gunshot. Leora's eyes were her mother's, soft but unbreakable. "I was there," she continued calmly. "In the rain. In her belly. When you walked away." Victor stammered. I didn't know." "You knew enough," she said. "Enough to abandon us." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents showing that every remaining asset he owned now belonged to her. "I'm not here to destroy you," she said quietly. "You already did that yourself." Tears streamed down Victor's face for the first time in his life. "Your mother," he whispered. "She loved you," Leora said. "That was her tragedy." She stood, straight and dignified. "I will fund shelters for abandoned women, hospitals, schools, in her name." "And me?" he asked, broken. "You will live," she replied, "knowing what you lost." Years later, a women's shelter stood where Amara had once been abandoned. Above its entrance were engraved words: "You are worth more than the world." Leora often visited quietly, helping mothers, holding babies, listening to stories that sounded painfully familiar. She never sought fame. She carried her mother's love forward instead. And somewhere, in the quiet after the rain, Amara's spirit finally rested, knowing her light had become something the storm could never extinguish.